Welcome back. New this morning, Vice President J.D. Vance quieting concerns of a potential war in the Middle East, saying yesterday there, quote, is no chance a military strike would result in a years-long-out war. The U.S. and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks next week in Vienna after wrapping up a third round of talks yesterday in Geneva. Leaders in Oman said significant progress had been made and technical negotiations will begin on Monday, easing near-term fears of military action ahead of the president's deadline. Iran's foreign minister is demanding that the U.S. drop its excessive demands for a deal, while Washington says it's steadfast on not allowing Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Joining me now is Heritage Senior Research Fellow Steve Yates. Steve, what's your reaction to all of this? And I've got to tell you, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think that all of this is more about China than it is about Iran. And looking at the enormous armada that the president has stationed in striking distance with Iran, I think is a serious message to China. What is your reaction?
Well, Maria, I agree that there's a significant element of that. China has played an enabling role historically over recent decades, helping countries like Iran bust out of sanctions. The armada there definitely gets in the way of illicit energy transactions that would be key to the economics of Iran in a time of crisis. And so, there's also a demonstration effect that America, no matter what anyone wants to say or think, and the Communist Party of China likes to say a lot about the West, we do still have unique, comprehensive power that can be deployed to key areas of the world, and there's almost nothing they're going to be able to do about it when we are so motivated. So I think the president has really taken a new definition of maximum pressure, and he wants negotiations to be the result, but he will preserve the right and ability to strike hard. I think that does send a new and clearer deterrent message to China if they're rational and watching how it's unfolding.
Well, I mean, look, final word on Iran. Are you expecting this to end in strikes and taking out the Khomeini regime?
I do expect there to be strikes, but I expect them to be targeted with a strategic intent of making them sober up and come back to the table with serious intent. They've continually tried to minimize the scope of what the agreements might be, and there's very clearly issues at stake more than just the technicalities of the nuclear program in Iran that have to be addressed.
Meanwhile, the U.S. and China staking out their trade positions ahead of the president's visit to Beijing at the end of March. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer told me that tariffs on China will remain between 35% and 50%. And Beijing is warning that it will take, quote, all necessary measures if Washington moves forward with any new levies. Meanwhile, the House China Select Committee says Beijing is expanding its space footprint across Latin America with at least 11 new facilities. Lawmakers warn that the sites could have dual-use military applications, potentially boosting Beijing's surveillance in the Western Hemisphere. The panel urging the Trump administration to roll back Chinese space infrastructure, it says, threatens U.S. security. U.S. security interests. But, Steve, I don't know what we should worry about more, China's surveillance of the U.S. or surveillance in the U.S. by our own government. I mean, this is happening as the CEO of Anthropic is out with a pretty significant statement this morning. He's pulling his company out of the Pentagon contracts over concerns that his products could be used for mass domestic surveillance as well as fully autonomous weapons. What do you make of this Anthropic situation?
Well, Maria, I'd take the glass half full part of this. If you take the comparison with China, in China, there is no one who would step forward and publicly challenge if the government is engaging in comprehensive domestic surveillance. It's a given. It's a feature, not a bug, in the People's Republic of China. The fact that we can have a prominent high-tech firm CEO step forward and say that there is a concern about this in the United States will provoke a reaction where we still have some checks and balances. Is it a legitimate concern in principle? Of course, it always will be. It's kind of in the DNA of the American experiment we're celebrating 250-year birthday for. But the fact that this can be out in the open and debated and he isn't locked away or disappeared is the fundamental difference and the reason why we do have to continuously struggle to make sure that whatever AI foundation we have for our ordinary life and especially our military respects human dignity and truth. That is what ultimately will distinguish between the tech and AI infrastructure of China, and the space race that's getting alluded to is also one that we must win if that's going to succeed. That's where energy, materials, and also ultimate superiority for military and other purposes will be at stake. And so that, to me, is the great game of this century.
Well, you're right. And you know, I am one that understands the national security threat and is typically hawkish on that. You know, I believe that we need to ramp up our military because the world is changing and China is on the march and Russia is on the march and Iran is on the march. But, you know, with this statement from Anthropic, it raises the question of whether the Department of War needs to come out and address it, or is this just employees at Anthropic who are woke, like Google employees used to attack its leadership for working with government? I mean, is that what this is about? That Anthropic is woke and liberal and wants to make a statement about working with the Trump administration?
Well, there's a risk of that for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of average Americans and allegedly educated Americans aren't going to know whether this is being done or how it could be done. But I think one principle that should be clear and probably already applies, maybe alleviating this concern, is that neither humans nor machines are legally or constitutionally allowed to engage in the activity that they describe. We've had the FISA court controversies of the past, and that is one of the imperatives for getting that FISA court situation sorted the right way. And that's basically to make it so that we can protect the United States and our citizens, provide for the common defense, one of the reasons we have a republic, while still respecting the individual rights and dignity of our citizens. And so that's existed whether it's humans doing it. It has to exist if machines are doing it too. I think the law is there, and we just have to make sure that our policymakers are giving that same reassurance, and our tech executives are following that.
What a moment in time, Steve. Man versus machine. And it is reality right now. Steve, good to see you. Thank you. Steve Yates, we'll keep following it and talk with you along the way. We'll be right back.